Welcome to Kumbasoft DPAA tutorials. This tutorial is a third of three of the aggregated probe view, and this one details some of the information and some of the advanced features of viewing transaction details and the information you can see within there. So we pick up where the last video takes off, leaves off, except for we've grabbed some more transactions here to be able to show some things. And one of the things we want to be able to explain is you can see more than one transaction detail at a time just by selecting the different transactions using Control or Command click. What I do want to bring your attention to is one of the advanced features here, and this is why we show you the global transaction ID. And that is because we had these two services are chained together. That means when this first service is called, in certain circumstances, it will call out to this service here. And so when you see the exact same global transaction ID in spite of the individual transaction ID, it lets you quickly see chained transactions even if they're in different services. And in fact, they may not even be in the same appliance, but in our case it is. So I want to show you how all that works. The guy can select these two together, and then we're going to select the hamburger menu, and I'm going to select Open Selected Transactions. And once we get to this list, as you can see, we've aggregated all of that information together. So now we're seeing everything that we should be able to see within these within the transactions that we selected, and all the actions for all the rules that were executed within those transactions. Now each section has a header which describes the transaction ID, the client IP, and the kind of information that you're used to seeing. But in addition to that, you get the transaction time, and this becomes a little bit more important to you as we start looking at these other details. Now, as you hover over the contexts, you can see some information about those contexts in here. And one of the things you might want to note is the time that pops up within there. If you look at the last value, you see the time of that action. And when you select this action, you see the time of that action. And you see there's a few milliseconds that have passed between the two. And so that kind of lets you know, that kind of gives you performance data right here. You don't have to go to the latency log or anything like that to see that kind of data. Now, there are different icons for the context, which makes it a little bit more useful than what you see in Data Power. When you see the little null symbol, that means there's a null context. This is an XML-based context. This is a binary-based context. And there would be other ones that we don't have in here right now, but a JSON context would show up with curly braces. And so you can see the various contexts. The other difference between DPAA and Data Power here is you can see both the input and the output context relative to an action. And so what happens is in Data Power, as you know, the context displayed between actions is really just the input context to the action that follows it. In DPAA, we capture the output transaction or output context for each one, so you can actually see what was output by this if it's something different than the input for the next one. And that way you don't have to go searching about the rule to find where this output context may show up. You can see it right here within DPAA. You do have the final context here, and some actions don't have an output context like the results. Well, a final results action would, but see, here's a set variable action, and that set variable action doesn't have its own output context. So when you want to open an output context, you just hover your mouse there and click on it, and you can see that DPAA displays this with context sensitive highlighting in there. You have a number of tabs across the top, so you can see all the header information. You can see any attachments that would be there, and like in Data Power, you can see the variables and the context to which they belong, so we can take a look at these. And then as we scroll through here, you might see some italicized text here that basically says, look, this is a node set, select the row to see the value that's in that node set. And so we can see the context of what's in that node set just by selecting the value, and DPAA formats that nice and easy to see for you. So again, we get all the values unless they're node sets, and then we just have to select the value to see the node set. If we look at the binary context down here, we get to see the binary output, much like you would see it in DataPower. So that's useful to you as well. The differences here are negligible. Now, when we see a context and we hover over the context, we see the values related to those contexts, again, much like you would see it in DataPower. There's almost no difference here. You can see the style sheet parameters involved in one, and if I select that context, I can see the context information here. Now, we don't have a perfect example of that at this moment, but if we did have an execution trace here, you can see the request, the response, and any error that might occur, and this would be nicely formatted for you as well. You can follow the execution trace, and you can see the values of the style sheet parameters, again, like you would like to be able to see them. But again, you can see those when hovered over the list. So this is very, very useful. And like I say, one of the neat things in here is that time value, which kind of shows you that, hey, there's a time value there, and then you can come to here and you can see the time value is leaving. So you can get your profiling data right in the middle of this and the other information that you want at a glance. To get back to the transaction list, simply click the left mouse button and you get back to the transaction list, and then you can go about looking at other transactions as you see fit. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, go out to www.kumbasoft.com. If you want a license, go out to www.kumbasoft.com. Put in your contact information in our Contact Us page. Somebody from Kumbasoft will get back to you. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.